Hi, everybody. Hi. Thanks for being here. Welcome. Come on in. Can you hear me?
Not really.
I don't think the mics are on, so you're going to have to.
They should be on. Hey, Tim, are the mics on? Okay. I have tea, so I'm a soft speaker at heart, so if you can't hear me, let me know. I think that worked, Tim. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for being here tonight. I'd like to say who I am. I'm Burns Maxey. I am with CitySpace. I'm the president of CitySpace, and we are the managing entity of the Old Town Hall in Easthampton. And I'd like to thank Tim of Easthampton Media, who's in the back there, who just pulled up the mic for us, for taping this for those who can't be here. I'd also like to thank the city, especially Mayor Nicole LaChapelle and the City Council, and for letting us be in this space tonight. I'd also like to thank those that we've had conversations with in the city, those committees and departments that have been super helpful in helping us with feedback and guidance on this project. And specifically, I just want to give a shout out to the CPA, the Easthampton Historic Commission, the Veterans Council, the Planning Office, the Treasurer's Office, and as well as the many community members, some of you that are here right now, for giving us feedback over the past couple of months. It's been incredibly helpful, and I hope it will be helpful in the future too as you come to be a part of this project. You know, I wish today that we could be not in this space, that we could be in the second floor of the Old Town Hall having this meeting, and that is what that space was used for initially. It was built in 1869, the building was, and it was not just used for meetings, but there was also performances and plays and dances and community events and all kinds of wonderful gatherings that the community brought themselves together in that building. So there's a lot of history there. After the city moved to this building here, the building sat empty for a couple of years. And there's a few people here that were a part of the group that came together. You know, it's funny being an Easthamptonite because we all have this sort of similar experience where we know that there's these do-gooders that come out to make things better in our community. It's like everybody's like, that's great, good job. And there were a few do-gooders who came together and said, what can we do with this building? It's just sitting there empty. And they put their heads together with the city and decided, you know what would be great? Let's make this building a hub for the arts and culture. And they came to the city and proposed the project, and the city gave a lease for the Old Town Hall. And they formed that plan to make affordable space for organizations and businesses to be in that building that are creatively minded. So it was really forward thinking. We're, 12 years later, we are in a very thriving Easthampton, and a lot of that started with the arts and culture, and we say that a lot. And this was, it really was mindful to think of where we are now. I'm not sure I would have had that at that time because we've come a really long way. Since CitySpace formed as a nonprofit and was awarded a lease from the city of Easthampton, we were fortunate to gain the tenants that exist now in the Old Town Hall on the first floor. We have, first we have Big Red Frame and Elusi Gallery, and then we have Flywheel Arts Collective come in the back of the building, and last but not least, Easthampton City Arts. And I really say fortunate because those organizations and businesses are the heart and the soul of that building. And not only that, because that's sentimental, they create these public events for people to come and enjoy art events, exhibitions, performances, music events, and they really make a vibrant area for the Main Street Historic District. So, it's a good thing that they're doing there. Right after we filled those the first floor with those great tenants, we had a few key accomplishments. One was that we lit the building, the exterior of the building. The colorful lights bring some brightness. It's pretty dark on that side of Main Street, so it's nice to see those towers lit up, and that was through CitySpace. And then we worked with the city in collaboration to renovate and restore the first floor of the old town hall. And that was thanks to a grant from the state and the CPA. And what we did is we put original style doors on. We refloored the very ugly green floor with original wood flooring. We took that up. We brought in a new public restroom. One of the assets to the building is it has restrooms that are for the public when those businesses are open during the day. So that was a good thing too. So I'm curious, I think a lot of you are going to raise your hand, but how many of you have been in the old town hall, the second floor of the old town hall? That's a lot of you. That's great. So I hope we all have this experience that when somebody comes into the second floor of the old town hall for the first time, they have this look of amazement because it's such a vast, unobstructed room. And it just has these huge ceilings, these beautiful glass windows, and the detailed wood balcony behind it. And so it's just this gorgeous space that we have there. And we have a few spaces, buildings like that in Easthampton, but we don't have a lot. We haven't been a wealthy community like some of our neighbors. So this is a gem for our city, and it's an important one, I think, to keep in place. If you go to the exterior of the building, there's a memorial, of several actually, but one is for the Civil War soldiers. It was built in 1869, right after the Civil War. And for those of you that are good at math, yes, no. Next year we'll be celebrating our 150th anniversary. So we're really excited about that. So just think about that for a second. Like how much history has happened in that space. In 150 years, there's just been some amazing occurrences and stories that are a part of our city. Now that CitySpace has taken those steps to populate the first floor and renovate it, we're focusing on the second floor to make it into a performing arts space and community space, and to make it accessible, and that's an important aspect of this project. Over the past 2 years, we have busily been working on the progress of this project. It's a lot of planning's involved to make this happen. It's a big project, and CitySpace has been a managing entity, so we're going through a transition. And the way that we've done that is we have a board that's active, and actually this is a good time for the board to stand up so you can put a face to those that are a part of this. If you could just stand up, please. So this group has separated out into teams. We all have tasks in these teams and goals. One is the building team, and they have worked closely with Kuhn Riddle Architects to go through the process of creating the documents that you see over there as well as what Alon will be presenting momentarily. It's an extensive process because it's not as if the architect just comes in and says, we want to do this project. It's a public building. It's owned by the city of Easthampton. So we have to go through a procurement process, an RFP bidding process, in which every detail has to be parsoned out of the project so that contractors can understand what they are bidding on. And so it's everything from the electrical to the lighting to the elevator to the entryway. And Kuhn Riddle Architects has done a great job in looking at the structure of the building, the ADA entryway, and so much more. And Alon's going to tell you all about that. So also, we also have a team that is the envisioning team. And the envisioning team is sort of the next steps of CitySpace. So we're not thinking we're just going to build this building and they will come. We're thinking, okay, so what are we going to do? We're changing as an entity because we're renting the space. It's going to be a rental house for the performing arts and the community. So how do we do that? What does our budget look like? They estimated projections for the next 5 years, as well as the target goal of what our rental space will look like, how it affects the considerations of the economic impacts of the surrounding area, the region as a whole. And I really think we have a good plan in place. It's a sound plan that is based on other rental performing art spaces. We have comparisons and whatnot. We have that up. We will have that up once we have the computer back here, so you can scroll through that and see those projections. So the cost of this project is about $6 million. Which is a lot of money. And you might be like, how are you gonna make that money? How is that gonna come? How's that gonna happen? So that's also a team that we have that's been devoted to looking at a diverse plan for funding, including state funds and federal grants. We're looking at the CPA for funding. And we also worked in collaboration with the city on a state bill so that the city could allow for a long-term 44-year lease to a project that is presenting performing arts in some way or another. And what that'll do is help us with historic tax credits, and that will we can sell those tax credits and earn money to pay for the project. We're also looking into foundation funding, corporate funding, and of course support from members in our community and beyond. And so that is a process we are working on right now. So right now though, we have this magnificent building that has a vibrant first floor, but the second floor is it's just sitting empty. I don't know how you feel about that, but that seems odd to me. It doesn't seem very sensible. And I think pragmatically, the plan that we have in place, we can be a organization that has a long-term future for the space. And speaking from the heart, I think that right now in Easthampton, we are poised to make this project happen. We have been talking about the importance of arts and culture for some time now, since before the creation of our master plan, which is outdated at this point. And our community is thriving. If you go into the Cottage Street Cultural District, all the way to the Mill District, you know, the wonderful news of the Ferry Street project that we've just heard is so exciting, to Mission Cantina, as everybody is also excited about. Those things, that has made our city just a thriving place. And the connecting point is really the Old Town Hall. So I put it forth to you that it's not smart for us not to use this space. We should be using this space and making our main street even more vibrant. And so I hope that you'll join us in this project and think of it as your own, because it's really our building. It's our old town hall that we're making vibrant again. So thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Alon Tierney. Alon Tierney is with Kuhn Riddle Architects. She is the principal. And we've really enjoyed working with her because she gets the history of the building and she understands the performing arts aspect of the building. She also has connections and roots with the building right across the way, the One Cottage Street. So she has a heart in Easthampton as well. So please give a thank you to Alon.
Thanks, Burns. Can you all hear me? Is that good? Okay, good. So, as Burns said, my name is Alon Tierney. I am president of Kuhn Riddle Architects. I'm getting used to saying that because that just happened this year. I've been in the field of architecture for about 24 years. My little connection to One Cottage Street is my dad, John Tierney, along with David Powell, had a business in One Cottage Street called Leeds Design Workshop. And so I grew up over in that mill building running around. When it was empty, it was just his shop and not much more. Now it's a very vibrant artist community. So Easthampton is near and dear to me. CUNE Riddle Architects, as I said, I'm the president, and we were recently certified as a Women Business Enterprise. We're a studio of 14 people in the center of Amherst. CUNE Riddle has been there since 1977, and we do architecture, master planning, and interior design services to a wide variety of clients in the Pioneer Valley. Performing arts is near and dear to my heart, so I love projects like this. Doing a project like this takes a huge team, and I think it's really important to give a shout out to the CitySpace board, and in particular the building committee, who sat through numerous meetings making lots of decisions. It's a complex process to put a project like this together, and they were all in all the time and completely engaged, and I'm always so super impressed when volunteers take that amount of time and invest it into something that's going to be so special for this community. Berkshire Design Group out of Northampton was our site and civil engineers. GNCB engineers out of Connecticut are structural design engineers. Robert Hall in Agawam did mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection. Kavanaugh Tachi in the Boston area was our acoustic, audiovisual, and theatrical design consultant. McRosty Historic Advisors helped us out during the study phase because the building is registered on the national and the state historic lists. We have to be very careful about what we're doing with the building so that we don't go against any of those historic features. And then Structures by Design in Northampton did the cost estimating. So the presentation, I'm going to try and keep it to 20 minutes because we want to leave time for questions and answers. I'm going to talk about the project goals. I'm going to show you a little bit of the existing conditions, talk about the design and the design process, and then open it up for questions and answers. So whenever we work with an organization, we always want to know what the mission is because that does drive the design. So this is a brief part of their mission, but what stuck with us as we went through this process, it's their ongoing mission to establish and maintain the town hall as a vital center for the arts and art organizations in the city of Easthampton. It's also their goal to sustain the legacy of the building as a public building, which all citizens of Easthampton may use and benefit from. And I think that's what Burns spoke to earlier. And so the two goals for this project is to provide accessibility, not just to the second floor performance space, but to the entire building, and to transform that second floor hall into a dynamic, multi-purpose performance space that can host a variety of events, theater, film, music, and other public functions. So I mentioned earlier that there are historic constraints, both the state and national register of historic places, and it's within the Easthampton Main Street Historic District. So our goal with this design is to minimize the impact any of the changes may have on the historic details while creating a modern facility that is accessible to all. What I will say is during the study phase, we submitted our proposed design to Mass Historic Commission, which is called a PNF, or a project notification form, and they came back with the high compliments of that the design has no adverse effect on the building. So, and I'll say this, so we move forward with the design based on that feedback. They still need to review it now that we've completed the design, so that's an upcoming step. So a little bit about existing conditions. I'm sure all of you have walked by this beautiful building, but just to refresh your memories. This is the south side of the building, which is where we're proposing to put the addition. So just taking a look at that, the white gable piece on the front of the tower is the Civil War Memorial. That's very important to the building. And like Burns said, there are additional memorials, but that one's very prominent. And that space is also used, my understanding, by the Veterans Organization. And that flagpole is also very important to that particular side of the building. The north side has a fire escape from the second floor. It's a tight alleyway. It's facing north. It is a difficult place to add anything over there because of constraints. The entry has lots of stairs going up to it, and currently the accessible entry is tucked around behind the very tall tower. Once you get inside, you can see the beautiful renovations that were done a number of years ago to the first floor lobby, and they also restored the main corridor doors that go down towards Flywheel and the red frame. And then you get up to the second floor, and the photos really don't do it justice. It's like Byrne said, you walk up there and it's sort of a wow moment. Those windows are 14 feet tall. The stage space and those medallions are kind of spectacular. You can imagine what it must have been like when it was filled with people. As you can also see from these photos, there have been some patching or repairing that's been done over time, so it does need some love. This is looking back towards the balcony. And then just looking at each side at those beautiful windows. And one of the things that's really interesting is that those windows are all different, except for two. And looking at these windows, you'll see as part of the design, we needed to remove one in order to get access into the second floor from the elevator. So just looking at the existing floor plans, on the right-hand side are the stairs that come up into the main lobby. Then there's the two grand staircases that go up to the second floor, or you can go straight ahead through the main hall to Flywheel, red frame, the gallery. On the second floor, you come up those grand staircases on the right-hand side of the plan, come in underneath the balcony, and then up into the open space. And the stage is straight ahead. There are currently two dressing rooms on either side of the stage, and there is a stair behind the stage that goes down to the back of Flywheel. So the program is a list of things that we developed with the CitySpace board. So these are all the things that they felt were important to be incorporated into the design. Number one, an accessible entrance. They thought it should feel like a main entrance, be glassy, open, and welcoming. One of the things that is important with a historic structure like this is even though you want to create a main entry, you don't want to take away from the main entry either. I'll talk a little more about that. Elevator, obviously, to make it accessible. We went through this design process looking at a variety of locations, and after the study determined that the south side of the building was the preferred location. A box office to sell tickets and concessions, just simple snacks and beverages, no hamburgers and hot dogs. The stage should be flexible and removable if possible, so that that opens up the floor space. The seating area similarly should have no fixed seating. It was important to think about providing seating risers, but also removable, and that we came to a decision with the CitySpace folks that about 300 people was an ideal occupancy for this space. The balcony seemed an ideal location for an AV booth, and also some additional seating if possible or needed for overflow. There needed to be some sort of performer space or a green room, someplace where performers can prep before they come out for a performance. Maybe as part of that green room space, there could be a kitchenette, just enough a sink and a microwave, maybe enough outlets so that an outside caterer could come in, but no cooking facilities necessarily. There needed to be a management office, and we thought, you know, there's limited space, maybe this also could be part of the green room spaces. Need storage for the tables and chairs and the stage, and then toilet rooms, obviously, and a janitor's closet, which has slipped off the page, but that's important to clean the space. So just a little bit about the process. We did a study about 2 years ago, and part of that process was doing a design charrette, which is the really fun part. There's no drawings or anything. This is it's a time where you get to talk about all the possibilities, and you put everything out there. There's lots of sticky notes and magic markers and pens involved. And then based on that feedback that we had from the CitySpace board, we started to develop some conceptual plans, and that's kind of what's shown on the right-hand side. And while we're doing that, we had our engineers go in and take a look at all the mechanical systems and assess what needed to happen in order to make this a performance space, and just the overall condition of the mechanical systems that were in there. And then finally, we pulled that all together into concept drawings and then a package that we can give to a cost estimator, and they can say, okay, we think if you're going to do this scope of work, it's going to cost about this much money. And we also did the historic review at that point to say, okay, can we move forward with a design that looks like this, and have it approved. So that sat for a little while, and then CitySpace went off and got more funding for us to actually move the project forward. Let me talk a little bit about the existing conditions in the site. So the highlighted area is the old town hall, and the town hall is up towards the street area. You can see there's a huge backyard, but it actually drops off quite quickly behind the building in a very steep slope. And so even though there's that additional land there, it's not really land that's usable to the town hall necessarily. This is where you can see the town hall again, and on one side is a former church building that is a daycare center, and to the north of the town hall is an apartment building where that alleyway is, and that alleyway is used very much by the folks living in that apartment building. And I just wanted to point out the accessible walkway that's between the church and the town hall. That is a sloped walkway that goes up to that door that's tucked in behind the tower. So from the study, we developed some schematic drawings. This is one of the first schematic drawings, and it's really sort of a massing model, and taking a look at it in context to the buildings that are adjacent to it, and of course to the town hall itself. We wanted it to look like a main entry, but in no way overcome the prominence of the historic front facade. We started to look at how that might work with the site, and pushing the entry back behind the big tower was important, again, to sort of give the tower the prominence that it deserves, while still having this entrance be very clear that it is an entrance. And again, trying to keep it very light and open and glassy. And we developed that a little bit further, just starting to think about, wow, what are the connections to the street? What nicely happens is that crosswalk actually leads right up to that front door, which is pretty neat when you're across the street. And creating a plaza was important, a place where people could spill out during intermission, or a place where the veterans could gather to have their ceremonies. And just sort of zooming in on that area there, so you can see there's what we're calling the entry courtyard. We're putting a few stone benches and the flagpole in the corner there. At this stage, we had thought that we would have to relocate the bus stop, which would have been right in front of the entry, but my understanding, and I forgot to look, it might have gotten moved already, or it's going to get moved somewhere else. It's not going to actually be part of this project. So as you enter into the lobby, it is at the lower entry is at grade. You can walk straight through to the elevator and go up half a flight to the upper entry lobby. It's all open, and that leads you into the existing lobby floor, or you can take those stairs up to the existing lobby. So this is just showing the construction documents, which is the set of documents that we just finished. There's some minor modifications, but the design has stayed pretty much as is conceptually. There hasn't really been any changes at all. Similarly with the first floor, just showing the addition down towards the bottom. If you really want to dig into the construction documents, I think they're over on that table. So getting into the what it's actually going to look like. And you can see that it's very much like it was in the schematic design. One of the things I mentioned is that we have to remove one of those arched windows, and as part of the historical requirements, when you take a historic element out of its original position, you have to display it somewhere. And so our thought was to display it right in that glass connector between the elevator tower and the building. And it's at the same height as all the other windows on that second floor, so you will see that relationship as you go through the doorway into the second floor. This is what it would look like as you enter into that lower lobby, and like I was saying, you can walk straight through and into the elevator or up the stairs to the right. The elevator will take you up to the higher level. And you can see in the way back there's another small arched window which needed to come out of that opening into the existing building. So again, we're displaying it so you can see it. And then as you come upstairs, so this is the schematic design because it's prettier to look at. There's more colors. And conceptually, it is very much what the construction documents look like. In the lower portion, you can see the red elevator tower, and you come into that glass connector and enter through what was once one of the windows. And there's the open seating space. We're just showing chairs to give you a sense of what it would look like, and we're showing a thrust stage. Where the existing stage and proscenium wall is, the proscenium wall is actually staying, and the opening in the proscenium wall is staying. However, we're filling that opening with the storage, and the storage acts as a backdrop to the stage. And we needed all of the space that's behind the stage in order to provide the bathrooms, the green room, offices, and we are creating a new mezzanine above that backstage area that's for mechanical space and storage, which I'll show you in a minute. If you go over to the right-hand side of the drawing, you can see the lobby with the grand stairs, and we've tucked in underneath the balcony the box office. So if you come up the stairs, you can get tickets at the box office. We will use the doors that were, or the opening of the doors that were there to be access for the box office. If you came up through the elevator, you would just walk straight to the box office, and we've tried to make it very visible, which I'll show you in a minute. So this is just showing the construction documents, again, very similar to our conceptual design. Some jigs and jogs happened, and some doors were relocated, and the box office got a little bit bigger, but otherwise it's very similar. And if you walk into the space, this is what you would see as you came in underneath the balcony. As you can see, the proscenium wall is still there, and those medallions which are existing are still there. And then that gray box is projecting through the proscenium opening. On either side of the windows, you'll notice that there are these gray wings. They're acoustic panels, which will also, they're on hinges so that they can fold shut over the windows and act as room darkening as well as acoustics. And this is what it would look like at nighttime. We didn't close the shutters on this rendering, but just envision it. On the balcony level, as I mentioned, on the left-hand side, you can see some stairs that come up. There's some storage, and then the mechanical room. And then on the right-hand side is the balcony. So the elevator would actually come up to the balcony level. And again, this is the schematic design. And the AV booth is located in the center of the balcony. And just looking at the construction documents, sorry, it's a little hard to see. The mechanical room got bigger, so the storage got smaller. We had to add in an electrical room in the storage area for all of the lighting equipment. And the AV booth area also got larger. But there is still area for some seating on the balcony. In order to get to the balcony, we had to add a bridge over to it. So you come out of the elevator, again, you come through that window opening, and that little L piece off of the balcony is a new structure that's suspended from the wall. And so you can kind of look back and see that, that opening that's coming through where one of the windows used to be and attached to the balcony. And you can also see the CitySpace box office tucked underneath the balcony. And on top of that, you can see a small white box, which is an open AV booth space. On the ceilings, we are providing a lighting grid and acoustical panels up there. And while we're looking at this image, I'll talk a little bit about the ceiling. We, our structural engineers were working on a project nearby on a building built at the same time period, and the ceiling had collapsed. And so plaster over 150 years kind of starts to disintegrate. And the way that the plaster ceiling is held there is the plaster is kind of pressed up into the lath, the wood lath, and it creates what's called a key. So the plaster kind of squishes out over the wood lath. And our structural engineer said, you know, I really feel like we need to go up there and make sure that the ceiling is okay. So there was a structural review that meant that they climbed around all over the ceiling and tested some of the areas, took photographs, and they did discover that the keying is giving away and the plaster is loosening up. So we have to take that whole ceiling down as part of this because it's deteriorating and it could collapse eventually, but also because we're adding this lighting grid. There's a lot of structural work that needs to happen up there. In addition, we're bringing in all new HVAC equipment. And so having contractors crawling around in that space and shaking the structure and adding all this structural equipment just would make it more likely that the ceiling would come down. So we are taking that ceiling down. There's some asbestos tile up there that needs to come down anyway. So that was a cost that was unexpected. But we are going to replicate it and provide the molding that is there as well. So, since we're talking about money, we've created the construction documents, which is a thick set of drawings over there, and had our cost estimator price it out in a lot of detail. I'm just showing you the bottom lines, because that's what everybody does. They just flip to the bottom line. So the building subtotal, all the work that's inside the building, is about $3.8 million. The site work, which isn't a whole lot, there's just that the elevator and that sort of plaza area. There are all new utilities coming in, so there's some utility work over on that side of the building. But so that's $132,000. You add those two together and you're up to about $3.9 million. You have to add in the overhead and profit for the contractors, and that brings it up to about $4.1 million. We always have design and estimating contingencies because especially when you're working on an old building like this, you start to open things up and there are surprises, or you dig in the ground and there's a surprise. So we try to document everything that we possibly can, but we can't see everything that's going to come up. So that's a cushion basically for those, there's an issue we need to repair or do something different. Escalation is because we know, the pricing is done for today. We know that we're not building it today. So typically they put 1 year worth of escalation on it at 2%. So that brings the total up to almost $4.7 million. And then on top of that, you got to put all the stuff in there to make it a theater. And that's what we call FF&E, or furniture, fixture, and equipment, basically anything that's not attached to the building. And that's about $235,000. So you get to about $4.9 million with those numbers. So just to explain a little bit about what the FF&E is in this particular project, in that this stuff is not included in the construction costs. This is something that the owner or CitySpace or the community needs to find funding for to fill the space once it is built. So it's the seating platforms, the portable stage, the audience seating, the lift, which is required to change all the lights and everything on that lighting grid, The fixtures, the actual lighting fixtures that hang on the grid, not the fixtures that are permanent, but the fixtures that are just for the theatrical lighting. And then the projector, and of course you'd get a newer projector, but the old ones are more interesting to look at. So that's about $200,000. And again, there's overhead and profit potentially included in contingency, and so tack on another $36,000. So that's where the $235,000 comes from. We try to be conservative in our cost estimates. We'd rather be a little bit high than too low. So that said, just talking a little bit more about the cost, the base estimate for just the building and site is about $4.7 million. We talked about the FF&E at $235,000, brings it up to $4.9 million. On top of that, we suggest that the owner have contingency for unexpected costs just around the project. There's fees for the design team who are involved during the construction process. We're on site on at least a weekly basis usually. Our engineers are out there. We're reviewing the process and the progress of construction throughout to make sure that everything is being built as designed. And there are always questions with the contractors. Like I said, we can't draw absolutely everything. So it's a collaborative process for the designers and the contractors throughout construction. So that's a fee of $150,000 for that list of folks I talked about at the beginning of the presentation. And then there are miscellaneous soft costs that also have to be added in. The owner or CitySpace is going to want to have a representative who's reviewing the construction independently. In order to get some money, they probably are going to want to hire a tax credit consultant. They can get historic tax credits, which can help fund the project, but you have to pay somebody to figure out how to get that money. And there's all the fundraising expenses, and then occasionally there are special consultants that need to be brought on during construction. So that's, a budget for that. I want to add inflation costs yet again because we're probably not going to build this project next year. And construction costs over this past year have gone up substantially. It's not been the normal 2%, it's more like 5 to 8%. So we felt it was important to say, if this goes out 2 or 3 years, we really think that you should add on these additional costs. So that's again, $275,000 if you get to 2019 and $287,000 2020. So that's where we're bumping up against the $6 million number, if that makes sense. So just in summary, as Byrne said, Easthampton Town Hall is at the heart of a growing, vibrant, art-focused community. The proposed design provides a modern solution to accessibility and the potential to become a thriving multi-purpose performance space. We've completed the construction documents. We know what the costs are, and that's so that CitySpace can go out and get the money to do the construction. As I mentioned earlier, the final design documents need to be submitted to the Mass Historic Commission and get their final blessing. And then the last step, once you've got all the money, is you have to get a contractor. So there's a public bidding process that would happen to select both the general and subcontractors. And then we do the construction, which we think could be a 12 to 18 month time period, depending on when you start the project. So that's it. I open it up for questions and commentary on the way back.
James Zarvis. How did you arrive at the 300 capacity number?
I might let some of the CitySpace folks speak to that, but that was, I believe, based on a desire in the surrounding community of a rental space, and that the ideal capacity, both for the size of this space, but what people might be wanting to rent the space out for when you look at other facilities in the area. Would anybody from CitySpace want to chime in on that?
Well, I think currently, looking at any of the available spaces, you go from Right now, the, in Northampton, the biggest space they have is about 190. And then you go to the Academy of Music or the Calvin, which is much bigger. This is, and a lot of groups are looking for 300 seat capacity. And we've got a unique situation where we have a space that can accommodate that. So that's how we came up with it, because we know we can accommodate it, and it's a needed space in the area, in the broad area.
And I guess what I would add to that as part of the conversation was it doesn't have to be 300,
No.
that there's flexibility in how you could set up that stage or no stage at all, or tables and chairs, so it doesn't have to be 300. It could be 100 people and still feel, it could be 50 people, honestly, and still feel like a comfortable space and not too big. But 300 was sort of the maximum capacity.
Thank you. I'm going to cross with Maureen if I may. I think I saw, I'm not quite sure, so I need your help with this, a stairway in the back in the original design that went downstairs to where Flywheel is now. In the new design, you have office space, bathrooms. What's going on with that stairway going down below? Is it getting removed and Flywheel will get additional space? Also, I want to make one additional comment before you answer. I think your design is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very much in support of it.
Great, thank you. So that stair did go away so that we could get that additional square footage. Our task was to focus on just the second floor. So we did not look at removing that stair, and you actually can't remove it because it's also underneath that stair is the stair down to the basement. So I guess it becomes a shelving system for Flywheel.
And if I might, currently that stair isn't used.
It's closed off now.
It's closed off at the top to secure the second floor.
Yeah.
Are there any parking considerations that are being brought up with that?
I'm going to turn that over to the CitySpace folks.
There's about 6 spaces right in front of the building. They're in the less than a mile radius, half-mile radius actually, there are 130 plus spots that are available, free parking in Easthampton. If you look from the business plan, I'll show you right here, if you don't mind. If you look at the above radius of the Old Town Hall, which is right here, you can see this is all where the yellow spots, that's all parking here. This is all open parking space that is privately owned. We're hoping to work with the city and the planning office to try to come up with a solution for when 300, or it wouldn't be 300, 150 cars come into Easthampton, and there's Galaxy and there's Coco, and they have to have their spaces there. Hopefully they're going to the performance and then to Galaxy. There's ample amount of parking in Easthampton that is available, and so we're trying to figure out a way to utilize that. There's a lot of, there's also the massage school that doesn't use their parking at night. We're hoping to talk to them about some possibilities of collaboration. But like I said, there's a lot of options of maybe collaborative sharing of parking, or finding a parking area that's feasible for city parking in the future. What I'd like to do is have a meeting of the minds within the Main Street Historic District of those city businesses that are, I mean not city businesses, those businesses that are there in the area with the planning office to talk about some viable solutions, because as we all know, I mean, I lived in San Francisco, and I don't think parking is an issue here. But, you know, a lot of people say their parking is an issue because you have to walk a couple blocks or a block. So, you know, I think that we have some good solutions that will help the city out in the future as well for that area and parking. Okay. Anybody else?
Is there any impact on the first floor tenants during construction?
Yes.
And will there be times that they cannot be in the building?
Yes. We have talked about that. We are bringing in a new water service. We're bringing in a new electrical service. Part of this project is a whole new heating system for the second floor, high efficiency heating and cooling. And because of the gas moratorium, we have to actually improve the heating on the first floor as well, because we have to have a more efficient system on the first floor in order to balance the amount of gas BTUs that we're using. So that will be part of working with the contractor in terms of making sure that we minimize the amount of impact we have on the business and businesses that are down there. It'll be tricky because it's not like it's necessarily a 9-to-5 business, especially for Flywheel. So that once we get a contractor on board, there will be a negotiation of scheduling for those times when we do need to disrupt the entire building.
What's the legal standing capacity with no seats, no stage? It's actually over 500. However, because of the number of exits out of that space and the number of bathrooms, we have to have a limited occupancy based on the number of bathrooms that we have and the number of egress points. So I forget exactly what it is, but it does say that on the documents in the code review. I want to say it's around 400 or 350 or something like that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is Flywheel getting additional soundproofing, or?
We are, we're filling the floor cavity between, above Flywheel's ceiling space. We did an acoustical study to try and determine how do you have two performance spaces operating at the same time. And we looked at a bunch of options. Some of them were very expensive and very intrusive to the space structurally. So what we settled on was a good enough plan, which was to fill the floor cavity with cellulose insulation. It does mean that there'll have to be some scheduling coordinated. You can't have two rock bands at the same time, or certainly not a rock band and a poetry reading at the same time.
Did you mention the timeline for construction, or is it contingent upon funding? If there was an angel donor, could this start construction tomorrow?
You know what?
Really?
I would say that if there was an angel donor, I'd put it out to bid right now. This is prime time for, the sooner the better in terms of costs. And bidding is always good in January when contractors are a little bit slow, and get all the numbers together, pre-order, and start construction in March or April would be an ideal time. So if you got a check, we'll cut the burns.
Just to follow up on that, so if they started in March or April, how long do you think it would take to finish the project?
If they started in the spring, I think it's a 12-month project. If it started in the middle of summer, because of winter conditions, it could stretch to 18 months. So again, the timing is critical. That will also reduce the cost if the contractor knows they have a 12-month period as opposed to having to go through winter conditions.
Can you talk about what your funding plan might be? You mentioned tax credits as a source of revenue. I don't know if those get sold on a lump sum basis or if they provide annual revenue. You know, how do you hope to make this happen?
So we're looking at a number of sources of funding, starting with the CPA. Easthampton has been very generous and so far, and we're looking to apply for a Massachusetts Cultural Facilities Fund grant. So we have a number of foundations that we're applying for, as well as corporate donations. We're working right now with a capital campaign consultant to help us figure out the plan exactly. The historic tax credits are exactly that we would sell those. And we have an estimated budget of how much we can make from each of those. So So it's really sort of bringing together those different sources as well as having a capital campaign on top of that, which is going to the community for donations, and that's about $400,000.
Do you have a timeline for that? Because presumably that takes 6 months, a year, just
Absolutely,
to try to pull
yes.
that all together.
So we have a timeline of 2021 for the project. That could change one way or the other. We could have that angel donor that comes in, or a couple of them, and so it depends. It's very dependent on that funding. Like I said, we're working with that consultant to help us build out that timeline exactly of what's feasible. Something that's part of that feasibility study that she's doing is talking to the community, talking to businesses, talking to people and corporations that would be potential donors to see what the feasibility is, so that we'll know exactly what our timeline would be. Yeah.
So presumably, again, there's some revenue. It's a $6 million project, but you may need, I don't know what the number is, 4 million, 5 million, 3 million, something that the tax credit sale won't cover, for instance.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Oh, just that, I guess it comes down to what do you think the tax credit value might be? Is that in millions, hundreds of thousands?
I think we have down about 500,000 right
Okay.
now. Yes, so it's not millions for the tax
Okay.
credits. If you look at our,
There's a breakdown of
yeah,
these now.
we have a breakdown over here. Put it here, I think. Let's see. Let me put it on the screen for everybody. So our sources of funding, we're looking at CPA bonded funds of $3 million, historic tax credits, $650, MCC facilities funds. This is guesstimate. We may get these funds this year and portion of next year as well. 500,000 state designation. We're looking into the possibility of earmark funding for 500,000. That could be more. That could be less. An ADA state grant that would come afterwards. That's a federal grant. Private funds, foundations, 400,000. Corporations, 300,000. Individuals, 400,000. Yeah. Part of the individual funding is figuring out how many specific donations we would need, a giving tree essentially of we need this many at this level and what's feasible in the community.
I would assume that operating revenue would probably, hopefully at best, cover operating expenses.
Yes.
That would be a source of capital.
Right, so the soft costs, we have 2 years of operations for that second floor for 100,000. And there's some discussion about potential for future endowment. So we're looking at that as a possibility as well. Yeah, and we also have the revenue source of the tenants on the first floor. Yes. Good question, thank you. Anybody else? Oh, well, yes.
The design is fantastic.
Yay. Thank you very much. We have a sign-up sheet over here as well as all the documents that I really would love for you to look through. We have them on our website as well if you want to sit down and look through the plans and the cost estimates. You can sign up. We're sending out information about the project as we get updates. So if you are not on our mailing list, I hope you'll take a minute to sign up. We'd love to keep you updated about the project because you took your time out of your evening to come here and we want to make sure that you're in the know. So thank you very much for coming and reach out if you have any questions after this. Thank you.